What the conservative-leaning Wall Street Journal has called the, quote, dumbest trade war in history has put Republican elected officials between a rock and a hard place, politically speaking. The problem stemming entirely from their relentless blind loyalty to Donald Trump and all of his inane policies. On one side, a president who lives on Earth 2, seemingly undeterred by the damage his tariffs are doing to the American people and the American economy. Undeterred by the markets tanking again, the Dow falling about 500 points today. Donald Trump today threatening to put everyone's favorite bottle of wine out of reach for most people's budget, threatening a 200% tariff on wine and liquor imported from Europe. That is in response to a retaliatory tariff from the European Union. Tariffs on steel and aluminum imported from anywhere in the world went into effect last night. Trump telling Americans, we don't need that stuff Canada sells.
We don't need their lumber. We don't need their energy. We have more than they do. We don't need anything. We don't need their cars. I'd much rather make the cars here. And there's not a thing that we need. Now, there'll be a little disruption, but it won't be very long. But they need us. We really don't need them. And we have to do this. I'm sorry, we have to do this.
Said no one. The United States imports 30% of our lumber from abroad, mainly from Canada. 60% of the oil that runs through American refineries is from abroad, again, mostly from Canada. And Canada is the third largest source of cars that are imported in America by Americans. According to Trump, we don't need you, Canada. It's squeezing Republicans on the other side of Trump because their constituents live in reality and the basic facts of life and the laws of economics, and angry and frustrated American voters who have been promised by Donald Trump and those Republicans that the price of everything would go down. Businesses from Best Buy to Target to major airlines are warning that the cost of tariffs and a weakening economy are going to hit hard. One Wall Streeter telling Reuters this, quote, a market that was cruising has been disrupted by the White House. The volatility is in part caused by the market's uncertainty as to what the administration's objectives are. Why are we going after Canada exactly? According to Trump, administration officials, people like the Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins of Get a Chicken If You Think Egg Prices Are Too High fame, it's all part of their plan. Listen.
You have J.P. Morgan now saying a recession is up to a 40% possibility. So what is it? Is it Hassett and Gasparino, or is it Jamie Dimon at J.P. Morgan?
Well, first of all, good morning, and thanks. Great to be with you on this beautiful day here at the White House. Listen, the bottom line is this. No one really knows. I think what's really telling is the president is so focused on not the short term, which, as we all know, in politics, everyone's always worried about the short term. He truly wants to fix America.
Short-term pain for whatever she's talking about in the long term was never any part of what Donald Trump promised the voters.
Starting on day one, we will end inflation and make America affordable again. We'll do that. We've got to bring it down. Starting on day one, we will end inflation and make America affordable again. Starting on day one of my new administration, we will end inflation and we will make America affordable again. It's not affordable. So when I win, I will immediately bring prices down. I will instruct my cabinet that I expect results within the first 100 days or much sooner than that. I would say the first 7 days is fine.
It was in every speech. It was usually the biggest applause line. Every day, everywhere he went. Day one. Now, the yawning gap between what Trump promised as a candidate and what he's doing as a president is starting to cause heartburn among Republican electeds. Senator Mike Rounds tells NBC News this, quote, look, this isn't the way I would do it. I think they want to try something different than from the previous administration, but they've got to show some success fairly quickly. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul tells NBC News this, quote, there are stories coming out talking about cars costing $10,000 more. And of course, we are worried about bourbon. We want to sell our bourbon. The Canadians are going to block our bourbon. Now that you add lumber costs to that and steel with tariffs, nobody at home is coming up to me and saying, please put the tariffs on. Over in the House, stuck between Donald Trump and his unpopular agenda and their own voters, Republicans are doing everything and anything they can to avoid the subject. New York Times reports this, quote, House Democrats have planned to force a vote on resolutions to end the tariffs on Mexico and Canada, a move allowed under the National Emergencies Act, which provides a mechanism for Congress to terminate an emergency like the one Trump declared when he imposed the tariffs on February 1st. But Republican leaders on Tuesday slipped language into a procedural measure that would prevent any resolution to end the tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China from receiving a vote this year. They did so using a particularly unusual contortion. They essentially declared the rest of the year one long day, nullifying a law that allows the House and Senate to jointly put an end to a disaster declared by the president. But whatever gobbledygook they try to do procedurally, Republicans cannot outrun what people are feeling from a flagging economy or policies that threaten to raise the cost of living immediately, especially when it comes months after an election in which the price of things were the deciding factor for millions of voters. One strategist telling NBC News this, quote, at some point, members of Congress start going into full freakout mode. That's where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Anchor and correspondent for Bloomberg News, David Gura, joins us from Quebec, site of a G7 meeting of finance ministers. Also joining us, Martina Stevens-Gridneff, Canada bureau chief for the New York Times, and our friend, former Republican congressman and MSNBC political analyst David Jolly's here. David Gura, you start. More insults and more threats for Canada today from Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's astonishing. You know, you look at what Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on his way here. He was asked what he thought the reception would be when he got here, and he said, this isn't a meeting about how we're going to take over Canada. He said that in reply to a reporter. And in fact, that's not what's on the agenda here. There is a lot that is. Certainly what's going on in Ukraine and Russia is high up there. But everyone here is talking about and acutely aware of the fact that this trade war that was started just a few weeks ago continues to escalate. And Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, was on Bloomberg this morning, and he was asked about the ratcheting up of these tariffs over these last few days. And he said, if you make Donald Trump unhappy, he's going to react unhappy. So just an insight into kind of the mercurial behavior of the president when it comes to these tariffs. But as you laid out there, Nicole, at the top, it's having profound effects across the economy and markets as well. We've seen $5 trillion wiped out of the S&P 500 over these last few days. So this is serious business and having serious effects for, yes, for investors, for people across this country, many of whom I think are flummoxed by what's happening here, recognizing the fact that while the president might be talking about a period where there's going to be some transition, it's going to take some time, there's going to be some disruption. It seems like this is very real and that disruption is happening already. Talk of cars becoming more expensive, as you said. What we saw today, the kind of back and forth when it comes to tariffs on American liquor, followed by an even more extreme tariff on champagne and other French wines. These, of course, have a lot of symbolic import. People react to them. You heard Senator Rand Paul reacting to that bourbon tariff, but regular Americans do as well. And I think that what's kind of overlaying all of this is just wonderment about why this is happening and sort of how far this is going to go.
Martina, here is Donald Trump today threatening again to annex Canada as the 51st state.
To be honest with you, Canada only works as a state. It doesn't. We don't need anything they have. As a state, it would be one of the great states anyway. This would be the most incredible country visually. If you look at a map, they drew an artificial line right through it between Canada and the U.S. Just a straight artificial line. Somebody did it a long time ago, many, many decades ago, and makes no sense. It's so perfect as a great and cherished state. Keeping "O Canada," the national anthem. I love it. I think it's great.
I mean, equal parts idiotic and dangerous. What is the reception in Canada when stuff like that comes out of the mouth of an American president sitting inside the Oval Office?
So I think people are taking this stuff really seriously, and they're very concerned about it. I don't think they take it as a joke or even as a joke gone bad. Frankly, you know, people point out that all borders are man-made and in some way artificial, and many of them are relatively recent as the world came together to separate in different countries. But I think what people are finding most menacing is that this is coming from a friend, a NATO ally, an economic partner, a next door neighbor. And so I think we're past the point of wondering whether this is a joke or not. I think Canadian officials and society are taking it extremely seriously, and we're seeing the impact it's having across the board in the economy and society and in Canadian politics.
I interviewed Premier Doug Ford, and he seemed to be girding for holding the line and for meeting toughness with toughness. Is that the view? I mean, is that representative of the mindset of the Canadian people and the majority of Canadian politicians?
Sure. Doug Ford, Captain Canada, of course, as a premier, he doesn't make federal policy, and he would not be the one negotiating a trade deal for Canada. But we are hearing similar lines, in different styles of delivery from incoming Prime Minister Mark Carney, who will be sworn in tomorrow in Ottawa to replace Justin Trudeau. We're even hearing the same kind of language from the opposition leader, the leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre. So one thing President Trump's rhetoric and language and actions have done is sort of united the political spectrum of Canada as well as society in a really unprecedented and extraordinary way.